Okay, so I just got back from 28 years later, part two, The Bone Temple. Trailers. Mother Mary, from the director of The Green Knight, so I'm interested in that one. Shelter looked like an okay action movie. Disclosure Day, I'm interested in. That's the new Spielberg. It looks strange, like it looks unspielbergian. I do want to check it out. And then The Breadwinner, which is a dad tries to be a parent comedy movie that feels leftover from the 90s. Right. And then I've really only got kind of two other notes, at least on the movie itself. There was only two things in the movie that I felt compelled to like pull out my phone and like, okay, I got to write a note right now. So I did not see 28 Years Later in theaters last year. I was really busy, and everything comes and goes out of theaters so fast these days that it wasn't high on my like hype list. I was mostly like I was interested. I liked the first two, but I finally got around to watching it back in December. I was caught off guard. I don't want to say like unusual. That's the word that I'm trying to avoid using, because I keep saying unusual in my thoughts, but unusual is not the word that I mean. For example, my one line sort of review of 28 Years Later would be unusually life affirming, but I don't mean unusual. Unusual is not the correct word. It is unexpectedly life affirming. And I would say that extends to the second one as well, though the second one does it in a different way. As I was thinking about it, I think these two movies are effectively these are quite religious movies, but they are ultimately atheist movies. And I think that's interesting. I think it's an interesting component of them. I don't think it's something that I'm just kind of imagining. What I believe Alex Garland is trying to do is present a corollary to the typical disaster film narrative that is present in actually like 28 days and 28 weeks, is this sort of like man is the real monster kind of thing, right? Not anything unusual to see in a modern horror movie, not anything unusual to see in really any modern movie, and by modern I mean movie. The whole thing of like man is the real monster here, that is common enough that I can just say it in a funny voice and you'll be like, oh, okay, I get it, And saying it in a funny voice is not to imply that it is a stupid observation, but merely that it is a common observation. And frequently, how horror movies will approach that is a sense of, there is no metaphysical evil. There is only the evil that humans do to one another. 28 years takes that and includes it, but primarily asserts it through the inverse, which is that there is no good in the world except that which people do to one another. And it is not an argument. It is sort of a argument against a notion of inherent human goodness. It is not saying that it's like, oh, it is not appealing to inherent human goodness. It is not claiming that humans are inherently anything. In fact, it is emphatically screaming that humans are not inherently anything. They are what they bring into the world. It's hard for me to not sort of like mentally try and like lab what it is that Garland is like doing. Like, okay, like what's he thinking? What's he working through here? Because one of the things that I sort of just like feel coming out of it is this tension with that typical narrative of like, oh, evil exists in the world because people do evil to one another. And what I feel Alex chafing against in that is that there's almost an implicit like, oh, but goodness just sort of like exists. Goodness is background radiation. And I think the angle that Alex is going for here, that Garland wants to approach this from, is no, we should take ownership of our goodness. We should allow ourselves to accept that good exists because of us, because we do it, because we show it, because we create it. And that, I think, is it really changes sort of the texture of these movies, and that's how you end up with the first one in particular being like very surprisingly life affirming, right? That you have this very grim environment in the first one. You have this pocket community that is happy but is also clearly like very on edge. The village in the first movie has big midsummer vibes. Is the the sense that you're kind of, it's like, this is a midsummer type environment. And it's actually a little bit surprising in the first one when that doesn't really like, you don't find out that they're, sacrificing every 12th child in order to appease the alphas or whatever. So the first one's kind of got, it's grim, it's tense, and it's spooky. You've got this giant hill of bones, and then you get to the giant hill of bones, and you discover that the giant hill of bones is a memorial constructed by a eccentric but entirely sane doctor who has used a embrace of death as a coping mechanism to get through the horrors that surround him. You get this scene where he inspects and diagnoses Spike's mother and, realizes that she has significant cancer that has metastasized and spread to her brain. And, that even before the catastrophe, her condition in its current state would be basically untreatable. She is in no ifs, ands, or buts, like terminal stages. And they have this whole goodbye scene where he then like euthanizes her. And I saw this the first time, and this was what changed my like opinion on like how much I cared about these two movies. Was I was watching the first one, there's this whole scene, and I'm just like sitting there like bawling. Just like tears running down my face. This totally unexpected whole moment about like the beauty of life and the sanctity of death, and that people will come and go in and out of one another's lives, and that hurts. It hurts to lose people, but it is okay to hurt. It is okay to say goodbye. It is okay to move on. Like, that's not a thing I'm expecting out of a zombie movie, right? That's just like completely out of left field. So that was when I was like, it's like, this is not the movie I thought it was. And so hence why I really wanted to see this one in theaters, kind of like ASAP. And the second one does not hit quite the same height. And it is different in texture. It is more gruesome than the first one. There are some rough scenes in this one. It is it make no mistake, from all of the philosophical stuff that I may be talking about. These are both gruesome films with some truly gnarly kills in them. So, it is a horror film. It is a R-rated horror film. The moment that got me, full on spoilers for the very, very end of this movie. The moment that got me in this movie was the very last line. So the whole thing is that, like, the first movie ends with Spike meeting the Jimmies, who are this crazy bandit cult, styling themselves after what's his name, Jimmy Seville, the the now dead pedophile British TV personality. So Spike falls in with them, and he gets basically non-consensually recruited into the gang, and spends the movie with them, basically just trying to not get accidentally, or trying to not get killed by them. They intersect with Ian from the first movie. Ralph Fiennes has a big role in this one. He's much more present. He's much more front and center. He's arguably, like, I would say he is the deuteragonist of this movie, that it is split pretty equally between him and Spike, and actually maybe even more in his favor. So his whole storyline is that he the alpha from the first movie that he named Samson, he basically gets Samson hooked on morphine, and then starts experimenting on him after Samson says a word again, after a few weeks of coming back for, like, to get high with him. They Ian and Samson do drugs together and just, like, spend an afternoon tripping out on the hillside watching the clouds. Not expecting that in a zombie movie. So Samson, like, says the word moon, and that inspires Ian to advance his experiments. And then the Jimmies show up, and that sort of drives him to accelerate his timeline. And Samson basically regains lucidity. But then Samson is not actually critical. Samson is not actually critical to the climax of the movie. He doesn't interact with the climax of the movie. He has his own climax and then wanders off. And this is a point that, strictly speaking, is like a flaw. Like, in a lot of contexts, it'd be like, oh, it's bad filmmaking, because there's this whole storyline that takes up a significant chunk of the movie, but then doesn't interact with the other storyline that's going on. And I think academically, like, that is an accurate statement about the film. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's trying to do something else. And I think, given sort of the philosophical speeches within the movie, in between the bloodshed, is sort of this underlying, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the movie being this kind of, like, argument for humanity. And I think it says something, or the movie is trying to say something, in the fact that Samson is a good that Ian does in the world that is good because it's good. It's not good because it saves the day. It's not good because it rescues the hero. It's not good because it punishes the villain. It's good because it's good. And it remains that even if it doesn't achieve anything. That is, I think, what it is, what it's going for. So I think it's deliberate that it doesn't intersect. But then the bit that really got me was the last line of the movie. So Cillian Murphy shows up at the end in an uncredited role, talking with his daughter, and they have a whole conversation about the causes of World War II because he's teaching her history. Then they hear a commotion outside. They grab their weapons and they run outside, and they've got a scope and they're looking, and it's Spike and this other character, sort of the two survivors of the climax, are running from a horde of infected. And the daughter says, "Do we help them?" And there's just this like perfect line delivery from Cillian Murphy as he's like, "Of course we do." And then like they run off stage, credits roll. So the movie didn't hit the same heights as the first one, but just like after all this tension throughout the movie, getting into just that last line, it was like out of nowhere, one single like sob. A very interesting duology. Maybe will turn into a trilogy. It is open in a way that it could very much, they could add a third movie onto this, and it would be probably as weird and disconnected from the first two as the second is from the first, but not necessarily in a bad way. But also, if it's just left there, that's fine. It manages to sort of thread that line of like implying there's more story, without it just being like sequel bait. So that's good. It's interesting. A very interesting pair of movies that really caught me by surprise, despite the fact that like I like Danny Boyle. I like Alex Garland. So maybe I shouldn't have been caught by surprise, but like it kind of did. These movies really sort of caught me by surprise. They were not what I was expecting, and they, yeah, surprised, to overuse the word. To overuse a word, they surprised me in really pleasant and surprising and unexpected and surprise ways. Surprise.